Her actions were controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. This was not reckless driving. This was murder.
This is not just another story about a teenager behind the wheel. This is the chilling tale of a young girl who turned her car into a weapon, taking the lives of two young men who trusted her. The story of Mackenzie Shirilla is a story of obsession, betrayal, and a deliberate choice that forever changed the lives of three families. Today, we will walk step by step through the events that led to one of the most shocking murder cases in recent American history. From the quiet suburban town of Strongsville, Ohio, to the courtroom where a 19-year-old girl was sentenced to spend the best years of her life behind bars, this story has everything: love, anger, tragedy, and justice. Stay with me until the end, because this is a case you will never forget. Mackenzie Shirilla was not unlike many American teenagers. At just 17 years old, she had her whole life ahead of her. Friends described her as energetic, outgoing, and deeply attached to her boyfriend, 20-year-old Dominic Russo. To the outside world, it looked like a typical young love story. But behind closed doors, there were problems: jealousy, fights, and the kind of emotional turbulence that often consumes young relationships. Mackenzie was known to be controlling. Dominic, though older, was said to be laid back, sometimes even dismissive, which often clashed with Mackenzie's need for reassurance. Friends later said that Mackenzie could not imagine her life without Dominic, but Dominic had started to feel suffocated. Their relationship had reached a breaking point, and on the night of July the 30th, 2022, the simmering tension between them reached its darkest chapter.
And that they were worth his time. Davion and my kids have had more than their fair share of heartbreak, of hardship, and of loss. Davion was adopted with his sisters from foster care. They are biological siblings. We are honored to be chosen, or to have been chosen, to be their parents.
It was just after 5 a.m. on July 31st, 2022, when Mackenzie got behind the wheel of her Toyota Camry. In the car with her were Dominic Russo, sitting in the passenger seat, and their mutual friend, 19-year-old Davion Flanagan, in the back seat. The three had spent the night together, and the ride should have been an ordinary trip home. But nothing about this ride was ordinary. Instead of calmly driving through the empty streets of Strongsville, Mackenzie suddenly began to accelerate. Eyewitnesses later testified that the car sped past at alarming speeds. Inside the vehicle, Dominic and Davion likely had no idea of the horror about to unfold. Within moments, Mackenzie pressed her foot harder on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed, 80 miles per hour, then 90, then 100. And then, without ever touching the brakes, she aimed the car directly at the side of a warehouse building. The crash was devastating. The car smashed into the wall with brutal force, crumpling like a soda can. In an instant, both Dominic and Davion were killed. Mackenzie, the driver, survived.
Morphed from a responsible driver with 2 passengers into, quote, literal hell on wheels down an obscure route that she had just visited a few days before, pushing the pedal to the floor, demanding an ultimate speed of 100 miles per hour.
But barely. She was pulled from the wreckage with serious injuries and rushed to the hospital.
Can you start with your name? My name is Mackenzie Shirilla. I just want to say, am I allowed to address them at all?
Sure.
I just want to say to the families that I'm broken, sad, and lost, and my heart hurts for everyone, okay? Davion was her new friend, and Dom was the love of her life, and he was part of our family, okay? I'm just so sorry that this happened, and we're heartbroken, okay? And then, Your Honor, this was a terrible, tragic nightmare accident to have happened that she has no memory of, and she will never emotionally or physically recover from.
At first, investigators thought it was a tragic accident, a teenager driving recklessly, perhaps losing control. But soon, the truth began to emerge. Modern vehicles carry secrets. Mackenzie's Toyota Camry had an event data recorder, often called the car's black box. When investigators examined it, they were stunned by what they found. In the moments before the crash, the car was accelerating at full power, 100 miles per hour. The gas pedal was pressed all the way down, and there was no sign, not even for a split second, that Mackenzie had ever touched the brakes. This was not an accident. This was intentional. Further evidence added to the chilling picture. One of Mackenzie's sandals was found jammed near the accelerator, but forensic experts concluded it had become stuck after the crash, not before. Mackenzie had deliberately kept her foot pressed to the floor. The investigators came to a terrifying realization. Mackenzie had turned her car into a weapon of murder.
The intent was obvious upon seeing that video, that there was only one goal, and the computer demonstrated that there was no attempt to slow down or stop, that it was full speed into a building, and said tragically it cost 2 people their lives.
The days after the crash, Strongsville was in shock. 2 young men were dead, and the teenage girl responsible was in critical condition. But as evidence mounted, the narrative shifted. Cuyahoga County prosecutors announced that Mackenzie Shirilla would be charged not with vehicular manslaughter, but with murder. It was a rare and serious charge in a case like this, but prosecutors argued that the black box data proved her intent. Her relationship with Dominic became central to the case. Prosecutors painted a picture of a young woman who could not handle the idea of losing her boyfriend. They claimed that when Dominic expressed frustration with their relationship, Mackenzie made a deadly choice. If she couldn't have him, no one would. By the summer of 2023, Mackenzie was strong enough to stand trial. The courtroom was filled with grieving families on both sides. On one side sat the Russo and Flanagan families, devastated by the loss of their sons. On the other sat Mackenzie's parents, unable to comprehend how their daughter had ended up accused of murder. The trial was a bench trial, meaning there was no jury. Only a judge would decide her fate. Prosecutors laid out the evidence in stark terms. They showed the black box data, proving the accelerator was fully pressed and no brakes were applied. They argued this was no teenage mistake, but a calculated act of murder. They called it literal hell on wheels. Defense attorneys tried to counter. They suggested Mackenzie may have suffered a medical episode, perhaps fainting or losing consciousness. They argued that her sandal being stuck near the pedal could have been the real cause, but the judge wasn't convinced. When the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Mackenzie Shirilla was found guilty on all charges: murder, felonious assault, and multiple related counts. The judge said it plainly. This was not reckless driving, this was murder.
Then we were in the waiting room, and then his mom she did call me, so I answered the phone, and I was like, oh my God, like, I don't even know who was in the car, like, what's happening, was that Dom? And she said, what do you mean, my son is dead? And I was like, I'm so sorry. And then she said something like, and now I have to wait until your kid's out of the hospital, and then I didn't hear the rest. I was like, we loved him so much, and I hung up the phone. I did not talk about social media. I didn't even know what was going on yet. Okay.
On August 21st, 2023, Mackenzie Shirilla, now 19 years old, was sentenced to 2 concurrent life terms in prison. She would be eligible for parole after 15 years. For the families of Dominic and Davion, it was a bittersweet moment. Nothing could bring back their sons, but there was a sense that justice had been served. For Mackenzie's family, it was devastation. Their teenage daughter would now spend her adult life behind bars. The case drew national attention, not just because of its shocking details, but because of how unusual it was. Rarely are teenagers charged with murder for car crashes, but the evidence left little room for doubt. When police body cam footage was released, showing Mackenzie crying not about the deaths of her boyfriend and friend, but about her jewelry being damaged by handcuffs, the public's anger grew. People accused her of being selfish, of caring more about her appearance than the lives she had taken. She became known in the media as Hell on Wheels. In 2024, Mackenzie's lawyers appealed the conviction. They argued that the trial court had failed to consider medical evidence and that the sentence was too harsh. But the appellate court rejected those claims, upholding both the conviction and the life sentence. Mackenzie Shirilla remains behind bars today. She will not even be eligible for parole until 2038. The case of Mackenzie Shirilla is more than just a story about a crash. It is about the dangers of obsession, the fragility of young relationships, and the devastating consequences of one impulsive, irreversible decision. 2 young men lost their futures. Their families lost their sons. And Mackenzie, once a normal teenager with her whole life ahead, will spend the prime years of her life behind prison walls. This story is a tragic reminder that choices have consequences. One moment of anger, one decision driven by emotion rather than reason, can destroy not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. What do you think about this case? Was justice served, or should Mackenzie's age have been taken into account? Do you believe it was truly intentional, or could it have been a tragic accident? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story eye-opening, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories that reveal the darkest sides of human choices.